Good evening, and welcome to the CBA News. Tonight, we'll be delving into the country's history with sports reports and other topics. We will first start off with the prison reform. The prison reform was the attempt to improve conditions inside prison life. Dorothea Dix was the one behind the reform. She had been teaching Sunday school at a local jail when, to her horror, she saw criminals chained to the walls and kids charged with petty theft crimes locked up in the same cell as grown murderers. She traveled to different prisons to compare notes, and they were all the same. Horrible, horrible living conditions. They were even working, but they couldn't earn money to pay their debts. She especially didn't like how the mentally unhealthy were treated. They were locked alone in dirty rooms and whipped for their misbehavior. Dorothy thought they should be treated with care. She quietly took notes every day as she went to go teach the school, and eventually showed her findings to the lawmakers, who ruled for better living and better conditions for the prisoners, and to also institute a mental asylum. Now there is no solitude, which was another issue she saw. People were kept completely to themselves, causing them to go insane. Nobody is in solitude. Kids and adults are kept separate in different chains of the prison. And there's also a mental asylum now for the mentally insane. And now to Kenya with the African American Communities Report.
Even though African Americans worked as slaves all day and were punished, they had poor living conditions. They were usually housed in dirt floor cabins with very few furnishings and leaky roofs. They were put in there by the planters or owners of their plantations. The clothes that they did have were cheap and uncomfortable. And sometimes they individualized it with scraps and got more food by farming small animals and vegetables. And the slaves would also hunt and pick wild fruits so they would have a better life. Their culture relied heavily on family and religion. They feared separation more than anything else, including punishment. It was such an important aspect of slave and African American culture. Passed down folk tales to teach each other and future generations lessons. The majority of these folk tales had powerless animals overcoming difficulty with their minds instead of power. And many slaves were Christians, but African traditions were still part of their religion.
Thank you, Kenyon. And now on to women's rights in the 1800s. During this time, women were treated like second-class citizens and were pushed to the side in everything. In this time period, men believed the only use for one was marrying them for social status. Women obviously despised the way they were treated, but stayed silent about it until the 1830s. During the 1830s and 1840s, women became more bold and outspoken in subjects like wages and the job opportunities of women, and fought for them. One of the most important subjects was on suffrage, or the right to vote. Eventually, women all over America spread their opinions on many subjects. For instance, a woman named Dorothy Dix was one of these women. At the Massachusetts legislature, she stepped onto the platform to speak her opinion on how the sick and insane were treated. In her words, they were confined in this commonwealth in cages, closet cellars, stalls, and pens, chained and beaten with rods, lashed into obedience. This started a crusade for humane hospitals for the insane in 1841. Another woman was Amelia Bloomer, who was the editor of the first women's newspaper, The Lily. This paper lasted from 1849 to 1853 and was created by Bloomer because she believed that people would not listen to lectures and that written words were the best way to grab people's attention. Although the paper was not a radical one at first, it eventually transitioned into a paper that shared opinions on subjects like alcohol and articles about interests of women. But how could I go through an article about women's rights without mentioning Susan B. Anthony? She was a huge figure in the movement, who basically led the whole thing. She attended almost every social event she could have heard of. She led speeches, put up posters, joined an anti-slavery society, and helped create the Lily and many other women's papers. She's easily the most important woman in the movement. And now on to John.
Today I'll be talking about the Underground Railroad and the temperance movement. The Underground Railroad was a secret network of routes and safe houses that was used by slaves in the 19th century to escape to the free states. This network ran through 14 northern states and Canada. Those who helped slaves escape were mostly part of the free black community. The network started up between 1840 and 1860, before the Civil War. Train terminology was used to describe the railroad. Escaping slaves were considered to be cargo, or goods, and sometimes even passengers. Conductors helped the slaves move from station to station. The engineers provided slaves with food, water, and shelter. These figures were ultimately the leaders of the Underground Railroad. The most famous figure of the conductors was Harriet Tubman. She was responsible for the freedom of around 300 slaves. This all took place within 19 return trips to the South. She managed to evade capture from many bounty hunters. The price for her capture went as high as $40,000. Tubman served as a nurse, scout, and spy. One of her most memorable appearances was at a meeting of the National Organization of Colored Women in 1896, which was held in Washington, D.C. This constant fight for the fugitives lasted until 1865, when the 13th Amendment did away with slavery.
Man, I might just chill tonight.
Puppy monkey baby. 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 Puppy monkey baby.
Mountain Dew Kickstart. Dew, juice, caffeine.
Puppy monkey baby.
Oh, you look good.
Thank you.
Hey! See the guy taking my little girl out, huh?
Yep.
Huh. You know, why don't you go ahead and take my new car?
Thanks, Pops.
Go ahead, baby.
Watch this. Favorite spot? Favorite girl?
You messing with the wrong daddy!
I'm taking you home.
Why?
Car Finder on the Hyundai Genesis.
Back so soon?
Here you go, sir.
Because a dad's got to do what a dad's got to do.
Honey, what you guys do tonight?
Today, I'm out in the beautiful Florida Everglades, talking to you about slavery abolition. Slavery abolition is basically the complete end of slavery. I found this kind Floridian that is willing to share their opinion about the slavery abolition. Sir, what are your thoughts?
Well, I need slaves for my plantation because I need money. So I'm against the abolition of the slavery.
Okay, that is not what I expected at all, folks. I expected an answer such as slavery is unconstitutional. Other people thought slavery was against religious beliefs, and also that slaves have a safe house in Africa which they can go to. So I'm sorry for all you CBA viewers that just witnessed that. That is not appropriate. And back to George. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter, for that report on slavery abolition. And now for your sports report. As of yesterday, Little Miss Boncho got her 4th ever career win in the local Chattanooga Derby for horse racing. Little Miss Boncho won the race by a nose length over Mr. Wallace, and many of the fans and a couple of the other jockeys were saying Little Miss Boncho cheated in her most recent win. The judges at first disregarded the complaints, thinking they were just jealous losers, but eventually they did an in-depth investigation, and they found that Little Miss Boncho did have unknown sources in her blood, and her win was removed and given to Mr. Wallace. Little Miss Boncho is known as the worst horse in the Derby, with only 3 wins and 248 losses. Little Miss Boncho has announced her retirement. She will finish with two more races left, and she will be officially out of the Derby and no longer racing horses. Mr. Wallace collected his crown today in the morning and released a statement saying, "I am deeply saddened to hear of Little Miss Boncho's cheating, but it just goes to show you what happens when people get desperate for wins." Thank you for tuning in to CBA News. Join us tomorrow when we talk about the nationwide food epidemic coursing through bodies across the country. See you next time.